because we have representatives from some of the groups here. So I think one of the first questions you asked was whether institutions will find themselves in a position of doing the basics to comply with mandates, or whether they will be in a position to more fully embrace open access. And I wondered if anybody on the panel, perhaps Jill, or I don't have the best vantage point here,
yeah, certainly.
Might have comments on that.
Yeah, we certainly want to go way beyond the mandates, I think, because I think as Adam and Michael outlined, open access is a good thing in its own right. The discussions and the arguments are all about how to do it, not whether to do it. So the mandates are a good thing in that they're a tool that gives us something else that we can use to engage with academics. Unfortunately, sometimes the stick approach that mandate brings is effective. We would like to be able to actually go more for the carrots and provide information and evidence of impact and evidence of the benefits, so that we go beyond just the mandates to making it an integral part of the research process.
Yeah, it seems that I was talking to someone about this earlier, academics do see these mandates as just a bit of a headache, I think. So I don't think the benefits have in any way been properly expressed to them. And I think institutions are best placed to do that. So, I agree. I know you have a lot on your plates at the moment. But I think, a big part of kind of moving beyond just what the RCUK are asking for would come from sort of extolling virtues and showing academics what can be gained, and probably in terms of their own careers, I'd say, from publishing open access.
Obviously, at any time, if you have comments in the audience, please raise your hand, as Ken is so ably demonstrating.
I'm Ken Chad, and I do consulting with mostly academic libraries, but also public libraries, and they've come up in a couple of slides. And it seems to me that this open access, it's like a godsend to those poor public librarians who are undergoing trauma at the moment. I'm a researcher, I don't have an academic affiliation, so the idea that this material is going to be more available through, for example, public libraries. And when you think about the role of MOOCs, someone was saying, well, where are the people doing MOOCs going to get their resources from? Potentially one place is public libraries, and yet academic libraries, well, with some exception, totally ignore that channel and just kind of leave them out there to die. And I just think that here is an opportunity, it seems to me, where there's a huge amount of common ground, and I'd like to see, but it's not getting publicised. As Michael mentioned the public library thing, and I've texted a few public librarians and not one of them knows about it. Now that might be a fault with the public librarians, but these kind of initiatives just don't get, and academic libraries ignore them. They ignore them in regard to MOOCs, they ignore them in regard to open access. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I suppose it's not a question, it's a plea. Could you please get more involved with public libraries, because for goodness sake, they need all the support they can get.
Any comments on that?
Shall I respond to that? I think you're absolutely right, Ken. I think that one of the challenges with the Public Libraries Initiative is that, it's been driven essentially by the publishers, who saw it as a way of testing the water, if you like, in terms of the demand for access to scholarly literature from people outside the HE and research sectors. And I think that actually presents a challenge to the public library sector, apart from anyone else. A challenge as well as an opportunity. I think that it's not been fully recognised right across the public library sector at the moment quite what an opportunity this is in terms of increases in the amount of material that they can provide access to, potential increases in the clientele that they attract through their doors. The challenge, I think, is that they have very little in the way of resources either to market this initiative, which I should say is due to be launched within the next month, sometime before Christmas. There's a technical pilot going on at the moment across, I think it's 9 or 10 local authorities. So it's had very limited publicity up to now. But I mean, the risk is that people don't get to hear about it, and an associated risk that there is insufficient attention given to the need for guidance material, both for public librarians themselves, who are not as familiar with this kind of literature as the people in this room, but also for users who likewise will not be familiar with this kind of material. Now, where we are going to get the resources from to provide the kind of marketing and guidance material that I think is necessary, I think is an important question which some people need to give some close attention to.
Yeah, if I may have a go on this one, I understand what Michael is talking about is increased access for and from public libraries to subscription-based content, right?
Yes.
An extension of the licenses. But your question was more in terms of all the open access content available. How can, if I understood you right, how can public libraries benefit from that?
Well, I think the access word is, in this instance, more important perhaps than the open. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to hijack this on public libraries because we're an academic, but, you know, there's as Michael says, a huge, so who's going to do it?
And it is an important issue, of course, because, I mean, there is all this open access content out there. The problem is that as of today, the findability, the discoverability of all this content is a problem. And of course, there are services out there like Base in Bielefeld, who is collecting, is a hub for all these things, and they are director of open access journals. There is still problems in aggregating open access content from institutional repositories. But I mean, this work should be done anyway. But of course, if public libraries could engage in contributing or intervening in this process, it will be an incredible benefit for the public libraries. And there will probably be need of training and guidance how to find your way around in all this content. But the whole idea with open access is actually to open it up for the people via public libraries, for instance. And
I mean,
yeah.
to me, I've got to say I'm a bit nervous about the whole idea of using, of kind of promoting, of this being a means of promoting people going to libraries. Because to be honest, to me, the whole thing is a bit crap, really. I think the only reason publishers are doing it is because they're sort of paying lip service to saying, oh, well, now the public can read the content. But I mean, who is going to write down a URL of a paper that they saw on Reddit and walk down to the library and log it in, type it into the computer? I mean, it's not how people interact with the internet. And it's just kind of kidding ourselves. And my worry is that the reason that publishers are doing it is because they will come back in a year and say, well, look, no one's done it. No one's used this content. So therefore, the public aren't interested. And then we'll be getting a kind of skewed vision of actually what people really do want.
Just going to take another contribution.
Hello, I'm Phil Hall from Serial Solutions. I'm one of the people driving this public library initiative with the PLS. And we're trying to push the boundaries of bringing scholarly content into the public libraries. I'm involved using Summon as the interface just to give it a single search box. But we're trying to engage with the public librarians with 10 test authorities to start off with to try and get that engagement and get that partnership and that understanding with public librarians on how to actually understand and use scholarly content. There's a lot of people out there that are unaffiliated researchers that have been trying to get to this content for a long, long time. And this is just one response as part of a balanced response to the Finch report that we're trying to do. It is pushing the boundaries of how publishers view their content. It's pushing the boundaries of the technology we're going to be using to disseminate that to public libraries, and it's also pushing the boundaries of how public librarians can engage their users with this content. So we're trying it. It's a technical pilot we're launching in January next year, hopefully successful. And if it is successful, every single person in the UK can walk into a public library and have access to a huge amount of scholarly material. And as the joke was mentioned before, some public libraries will have access to more content than academic libraries. That's a risk that the publishers are prepared to do to try and open out their content to non-academic people. More than happy to take questions after this.
I should probably just point out that the Publishers Association and the PLA have, for a long time were saying that the public didn't want access to the scientific literature. I agree. I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction, but my worry is that it is a bit of a diversion from the kind of broader discussion of open content.
It's a response.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Actually, for me, that touches back to something that Vicky said earlier about the profusion of confusion and the need to create explanatory materials to advise all kinds of audiences on what open access is. And it struck me as a curious concept, actually, thinking of it afresh when you mentioned that. The fact that we're having to explain this to people. We haven't had to explain things to people in the past. Why? What is it about open access that is requiring us to have to explain things? And why do the many flavours of it matter so much when there are many flavours of subscription publishing that we haven't had to bother to explain to people in the past? I'll start with Vicky, but I'm sure others will have comments.
Good question. Can you hear me? I think largely it's because the term open access, it's been around for a while. We have seen the Budapest Open Access Initiative try and, attempt to define it a little bit more clearly. We've seen lots of subsequent declarations as well, but there's quite an emotive power associated with the words open access. I think because of that, it is quite hard to pin down in some respects. And this is where the talk about green and gold initially came in, I think, as an attempt to try and classify OA and maybe generate a taxonomy around open access. But, I would just reiterate the point, really, that I think because open access is such an emotive term, and because there is so many aspects of it and so many nuances, it's really, really important for us as a community to agree on a very set terminology, whether we're talking about reusability of work, whether we're talking about free online availability, whether we're talking about journal publication, repository publication, publication of the version of record, publication of an earlier version.
I'm just going to go to Peter first and then to Lars.
Thanks. To come back on this, I'm involved in a lot of open things, and open access is undoubtedly far more modelled than anything else. The term came originally from free or open source, and although there were wars about this in the mid-80s and so on between Richard Stallman and others, everything in the free and open source community conforms to the open definition. There is an organisation, an industry organisation called the Open Source Initiative, which certifies all these things. So without an industry body, you have chaos, and that's what's happened at the moment. Now, it's happened for two or three reasons. One, because some of the BOI declaratories saw this as a political thing rather than a technical thing. So particularly Stefan Harned has used the word open access to mean anything he feels like, and it's migrated over the years, and that's where this green and gold has come from. And I consider green and gold has cost this community probably billions of dollars by not pinning down what is meant. Then there's the fact that undoubtedly some publishers are able to use the term open to sell things to which they still retain huge rights, so that it's like healthy. If you say a food is healthy or something like that, that sounds wonderful, but it actually means nothing. And in this area, open has been so degraded to the fact it means nothing. And open access is the only area where open is not used in conjunction with the open definition and things of that sort. my recommendation would be that you set up a body as soon as possible to make this true. I've come across open access which is behind paywalls, right? That's not open access. Now, nobody here cares. I'm one of the few people who actually goes out and looks for open access and what it actually means and posts it. But I get very little response from this community. Thanks, Peter, for and so on. Or my content, which was with Open Springer with Biomed Central, was copyrighted by Springer and was categorised property of Springer. I was the only person who got uptight about it, and Wikipedia and other people like this, but not this community here. You don't seem to care about doing this properly and respecting people's rights.
Yeah, I'll just add that, we cannot neglect that there are stakeholders who have had an interest in blurring the concepts.
Yeah.
For instance, a well-known publisher has for a number of years launched the concept universal access. But it's only within the last couple of years that this company, Elsevier, has been able to take open access in their mouth. And now they're launching new open access journals every week now. But I think this confusion has, of course, caused a lot of damage. But I hope that we'll be able to clean up the vocabulary shortly.
I think, Peter, you're a sort of an exception, though, of an academic who cares and who reads the license and who actually observes this. So it's fine for us in the library community to exhort people to look after their rights and to do the right thing and to be careful about how they publish. But in my experience, the majority of academics don't engage in the way that you have done, and that makes it very difficult for us to do that.
Just a quick return on that. How many libraries have challenged publishers on their definition of open access and on the pricing of open access? Put hands up. Not very many, right? I challenged them. Ross Mounts, a graduate student, went out and did a comparison of open access quotes licenses against price. That should have been done by the library committee. It should have been done by all the people who are paying these thousands or millions of dollars for open access subscriptions. It beggars me that here we have all this money going into gold hybrid access, which I think is a waste of money, but nobody cares what actually ends at the end. Oh, if Nature says it costs $5,000, well, pay Nature $5,000. Who's challenging them?
The library community. There are a number of things going on.
Right, in public.
Defining public, I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean?
Where are people up in arms that I can see? Where is a declaration from all the university libraries that says these APCs are unacceptable, this woolly use of a license is unacceptable, and so on?
Well, the RL UK are
okay, fair enough.
A major national thing on that.
Yeah.
I'd just like to. Oh, my voice is shaking. I'd just like to. Back up Jill's point. I've been talking to academics on the phone saying, what can I do with something? I said, well, it will be in the agreement that you signed with the publisher. Well, I didn't read it.
Of course you did.
And that's what we're facing. And in some of our advocation kind of efforts, we're getting the pushback of why is the library telling me, what to do? So it's not as us and them, I think, as you're presenting it.
So the challenge here is a little bit that as the provision of information transitions or adds another model, where the responsibility lies also transitions. And in the past, librarians have been responsible for the licensing of subscription content and will read the licenses in great detail and negotiate them appropriately. Actually, with open access, that power moves to the authors, and they aren't trained to do that, aren't aware of the need to do that. And of course, librarians have an interest in this because it's all wrapped up in budgets and so on. But as you say, they don't have the authority within the institution to go to the academics and advocate for a better approach to open access. So there's something that there's a role there for RL UK amongst others, but actually perhaps more for the research councils, or who do we think should be taking responsibility outside of the library for training academics in how to approach open access?
I definitely would like to see that research funders and governments, for that matter, were much more explicit in terms of determining what they would like to see. For instance, should be published in open access, this and this license, and we will only allow payment of article processing charges under a certain amount. Things like that would probably help authors to do their choices.
Absolutely.
It seems to me that one of the problems we face is, I can't remember who said it earlier, but we don't have a grassroots movement for open access in the research community at the moment. The conversations about open access have essentially been conversations between librarians and publishers, and ideological, nay, theological positions have been taken, and the theology has tended to get more and more complex. And it seems to me that one of the key reasons why there isn't a grassroots movement in the research community is that actually the economy in which most researchers operate is an economy in which cash, whether it's in terms of income or expenditure, actually doesn't play much of a part at all. The economy which they operate in is an economy of academic scholarly credit. And they make decisions about how they disseminate their research for the most part. Now, I'm generalizing hugely, but I think it's a justifiable level of generalization. They make decisions on the basis of where they think they will get, or how they think they will get the most academic scholarly credit for the work that they have done. Open access actually doesn't come very high on the list of the priorities of most researchers.
Okay, if this is the case, and it might be so, then it would as well be very good if research funders could address these questions as well. Where do we like you to publish? What kind of rewards? What kind of reward system would be applied to reward you for publishing in the open, which we apparently all want to see? So we have to, the research funders and others who are doing research assessment and promotion have to reassess their assessments and reward systems in terms of giving very specific incentives to researchers.
I'm sure that's right, but I don't underestimate the difficulties and the barriers in the way of doing that. The research assessment system in the UK has made very clear since the late 1980s, and I can't remember how many RAEs have we been through, and now the REF. But for the last 25 and 30 years, it has been made clear that research assessment is not based on where you publish or how you publish your outputs. It's based on the quality of those individual outputs which you submit to the RAE. The problem is that no one quite believes it. Well, even though it's a system that is that is actually run by academics.
To be honest, I think the reason no one believes it is because it's true. I think if you talk to researchers, I hear this all the time. That researchers say, "My institution has told me that a +1 paper won't count towards the rep." You know, and it's just not true. But it's an easy shortcut for institutions to say, like if it's in Nature, then that'll be 4 stars. You know, I mean, we can all be fairly confident, and you know, it's an easy shortcut for people who are on these panels. And yes, you can tell them not to, but you know, it doesn't seem to make any difference. Very frustrating.
Yes, and that's why it's difficult to change the culture.
Got one up there as well. So. I think we've got a question at the back.
Yeah, hi. This is Alistair from Springer. Peter Murray Russ seems to have had a eureka moment today in that it seems publishers now have agreed to let him go and do what he wants to do. Now, implementing open access is a complex and multifaceted thing. An open question, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles and all that, what is the next single objective? What's the next eureka moment that publishers need to try and achieve?
Question for me. Okay. We're in the internet age, and I would like to see, and I think this is for the whole community, I'd actually like to see this going out beyond academia. So, for example, I work with a company in upstate New York called Kitware. It produces open source software which anybody can use. It's in the technical area, and it is one of what I call the scholarly poor. That is, they cannot have access to the literature, they're passionate about it, and there's this closed community which includes libraries, it includes academics, it includes publishers, and the view there is nobody outside academia matters. Now, we're in a position where there are huge patient groups out there. They don't want charity from this, they want to be part of it. So I think a really forward-looking publishing community would actually say, okay, let's do something where the community out there is part of this process. Now, Stefan Harner does say people outside universities don't matter. He said that 2 days ago. But I think people outside universities are really important, not just because they pay for this, but actually they're bloody good. They know lots of things we don't. There are retired people, there are people who've moved out of academia into business and so on. They make decisions. They should be part of the process. So I don't know how to do it. I know how I'm going to do it. But take out this huge amount of human knowledge to the community. The output of scholarship is, in my view, a fundamental human right.
No one's going to disagree with that.
But it's not happening.
We've also got a question down at the front here.
It wasn't a question really, but to a certain extent the conversation's moved on since I was going to chip in, but it was really responding to the discussion between Peter and Martin over the role of librarians and libraries in influencing the national and international agenda around fees and the economics of both gold and subscription publishing. We do have a role to play, both individually within our institutions and collectively as a community through our work with consortia and through international collaboration. So I just really wanted to make absolutely clear that librarians are pragmatists, by and large. We work with the models that we have and we try and make both work where we can, and we tend to be, by and large, agnostic about how we get there. But absolutely, we negotiate. We negotiate individually within our institution, and we negotiate collectively as a community. And I think, as Finch has shown us in the outcomes of the report, we will have a role to play, and we already are playing that role in negotiating collectively on the costs of both APCs and the costs of subscriptions. We, as a library, need to negotiate for our own subscription budgets within our institution. And even in the gold transition, we are seeing our budgets cut while publisher inflation still rises at 5% per annum. So there is a disconnect there, and so we're having to make that case, and we do it quite strongly. So I think that is the role that I play. That's the role that collectively I think we play both within the institution and nationally to influence that agenda.
Okay, very quick response. Well, first of all, thank you. This is good stuff, but you don't publish widely what you do. And I would also ask, Have you done any negotiation with the American Chemical Society on its prices, and did you manage to bring them down? Because if you did, make a public statement about it, because I haven't heard it.
Question here, or perhaps a response here?
Well, just leading on from that, maybe something useful the panel could do this afternoon is actually define, and at least one of your presenters used this statement earlier on, define for us a predatory publisher, or the behaviour that a predatory publisher might exhibit.
I think it was me who mentioned predatory publishers. Well, I think, there's been the biz millions, as they're known. Inevitably, when there's money sloshing around in the system, people are going to want to try and get their hands on it. And so there has been a rise of publishers with a low quality threshold. But I don't need to define them. Jeffrey Beale has produced a very handy list and a very comprehensive set of definitions on his website, and I would refer you to that.
Jeffrey
Beale, B-E-A-L-L. Beale's list of predatory publishers.
I
he defines them.
some caution against Jeffrey Beale's list. He has an agenda which is quite anti-open access, and I think that has influenced some of the. I think some of the publishers. I agree there are a lot of quite fly-by-night outfits on there, but I think others are doing their best to sort of be reputable, but because of mistakes have made in the past or things, it's. They've sort of been added and tarnished with this brush. So.
I feel tempted to comment on that as well, in my capacity as managing director for the Director of Open Access Journals. First of all, I don't like the term predatory publishers. I could identify other publishers where this label would be more relevant. Anyway, we have unethical or fake publishers entering the market, trying to exploit the new business model. It's very easy to set up a publishing entity, trying to, pretending that we are doing good peer review, we are doing good publishing services, and of course we have to charge you for that by charging you APCs. Quite a number of publishers has unfortunately succeeded with that. But I think the discussion about predatory open access publishers has gained unproportionally much attention. I have no data about this, but if we look at a proportion of open access articles published by those publishers, we are running into very, very, very low numbers compared to the overall picture. Apart from that, I agree with your comment that we should take Phil Beale's list with some caution. The criteria for putting publishers on this list are very subjective, from time to time discriminating and things like that. So we are doing the best we can with the Director of Open Access Journals to handle this. It's a question about the support we get from the community, how efficient we are in that regard. We are, in the new year, we will be launching much more stricter criteria. So we are trying to fight this problem about fake publishers.
I'd just like to, in our last 5 minutes, talk about metrics, which we've sort of begun to touch on there in terms of what's meaningful to academics. And obviously, we've heard today that the impact factor is still very much reigning and powerful for a lot of people at different stages of their career. But what metrics do we think will become more meaningful? And actually, as a first question of that, I'd just like to go back to what you were saying this morning, Damian, about all the different kind of metrics that PLOS is gathering, and whether you yet start to see any correlation between some of the alt metrics and the article level metrics and perhaps the most meaningful of all, usage citations.
Yeah. There is some evidence that that Twitter is often a predictor of citation, but not always. There is evidence that, as I said, the reference manager downloads are also a good predictor of citation activity, but not always. So I think if citations are, I think we probably need to maintain that citations are probably the best way we've got of judging impact of work, and so we need to come up with ways that that a citation, that kind of, as I said, sort of intention to cite can be captured early. I kind of feel that there might be some kind of 30-day index that, after that first month after publication, the sort of activity you get in a paper, it has all different forms, and probably some of them correlate more to activity than others. To be honest, it's a sort of burgeoning field, and I think lots will come out of it, but at the moment it's not entirely clear. I think one thing is that it's clearly very diverse. Usage is very different, and it's very hard to compare a paper that has 100,000 views and one citation with one that is very low views. And in fact, there is quite a divide. We've shown that there's substantial division between the two. So it's just more complicated. Unfortunately, it's just more complicated than a single number, I think. And we need to probably come to terms with that and decide what it is we mean by impact. So.
Got a comment from the audience, if we can get a mic way down to the front here. Oh, thank you, Ross.
Hello there. I'm just thinking something through, and I don't know if there's any scope for, say, JISC or Sherpa to look at some sort of alternative journal metric, looking at a metric based on how good a publisher is with regards to open access. So something like, what sort of licenses do they allow? What sort of mining possibilities do they allow? And then maybe looking at some sort of metric about APC versus company profits and things like that. Just a bit of blue sky.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lars.
Yeah, when it comes to how open a journal is, there is actually a tool out there developed by PLOS and SPARC and OASPA, the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association, on several dimensions try to determine how open a journal is in terms of readers' rights, reuse rights, and stuff like that. And this concept is currently being tested on a number of journals, and we hope to be able to announce the results of that shortly. There are other dimensions in determining sort of a quality of a journal, and we are working intensively with those in the Directorate of Open Access Journals in the next release of the inclusion criteria in terms of what kind of peer review, are the editorial board members identifiable, and so forth. Quite a large number of criteria to give a whole picture as good as it goes.
If that could be used in something like the ref then as an alternative weighting against a balancing counterweight for impact factors to try and level things up a bit.
I would just caution about the use of a single number, whether that's in terms of article level metrics or in terms of journals. I think that the differences between research disciplines, the differences in the motivations of different researchers operating even in the same discipline in different circumstances mean that we should be very cautious about putting too much weight on a single number. I mean, in the cliche, we need baskets of numbers, both at individual article level and at journal level, even when it comes to the assessment of openness. What is important in terms of openness to one researcher, whether as a producer, an author, or a user, may be significantly different from what is significant to another researcher. We need profiles, baskets, not single numbers.
Yeah, and actually, just to follow up on what I said earlier about citations, even the sort of quality of data you get from citations is very varied across fields. And in clinical research in particular, it's really not a very good indicator of impact of work. Papers that change practice aren't necessarily the highly cited ones. In fact, PLOS Medicine published a paper that led to a barbiturate being withdrawn from being used as in the death penalty in the US because it was showing that it was causing suffering, and that paper's had I think 2 citations, but has actually caused this enormous change in the law, and so these things are more subtle, and I think it's again worth pointing out.
I definitely agree that we should avoid having a single number, as it is the case today. A whole variety of figures, of numbers, but that they would be good, but they should be applied to the single piece of research, not the container of this research, the journal, because that's the most harming thing. According to my opinion, it is the impact factor. Now, Michael said that it's not playing a role in the UK research assessment, but in many, many countries in the world, it is actually Thomson Reuters who determine the research priorities based on the journal impact factor.
Okay, probably just got time for one last.
I was just going to observe that I think it is utterly inappropriate to have commercial companies producing metrics where the processes are not transparent and where these can change arbitrarily at a minute's notice. If we are to use metrics, and I'm strongly against metrics, who of you here uses metrics for what music you want to listen to and think is any good? But I'm against metrics. I don't have another thing. But if we are going to have metrics, let us have metrics which are open and created by the community. To give you one example, Acta Crystallographica, a brilliant journal, Acta Crystallographica, publishes data. It's very straightforward, publishes structures. You saw one of them today. Just publish ones that are right, and that's it. And they publish 10,000 a year or whatever. Thomson Reuters suddenly decided it wasn't a journal. No explanation, killed it off the list. Subscription went down by 30%. Arbitrary decision by a commercial organisation, unanswerable to anybody except its shareholders.
Well, we've reached the end of our time, so we'll have to can the discussion there, though I'm sure it could go on, and it probably will go on over drinks. But thank you all very much again for joining us today. I think it's been a fascinating insight into some of the practical realities that organisations of all kinds are dealing with in implementing open access. I think we've seen lots of examples of things that work, but also helpfully we've seen insights into things that aren't working as well. And it's clear that there remain challenges ahead, but actually that increasingly the community is voting with its feet, and we are able to move forward in areas that we weren't always expecting. So thank you all very much to the speakers. Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope we'll see many of you tomorrow at the King's Fund in Oxford Circus.